Well, hello and welcome to LYLAS episode 5. We are so thankful that you guys are joining us for this, episode. We have a lot to unpack per norm.
Yeah,
Um, as we said, we're just like in these places of transition, still trying to figure things out for ourselves and really feel like this is the venue to kind of air it all out.
that's right.
So why not? Why don't we just continue with this trend and open our hearts? As you could tell, we're recording this and it's February. We got our love for pink on. But really opening up our hearts to something that it does involve our heart. It's heartbreaking, it's heart touching, um, it's reflective in so many different ways. And I just am really excited that you decided to talk about this and are so brave in doing so. But we're going to be talking about parental loss today.
Yeah. Such a heavy topic, a hard topic, but one that I hope ends with a little bit of hope too.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to speak from personal experience. It's not easy. Like I said, it's heavy, but that's what we're kind of all about. So grab some tissues. I know I'm going to. This is going to be a tough one for me to make it through. Almost guaranteed to cry during this episode. I don't know. I got some tears out yesterday, but yeah, just to dive right into it, yesterday was the 9th anniversary of my dad's passing. He died February 5th, 2014. And Facebook is great at giving you those reminders of all your posts. And so I was scrolling through yesterday, and the number 5's always been sort of symbolic in my life. I used to say it was my lucky number, but now I've deviated from that. And I would just say it's rather symbolic. Facebook reminded me that my horse that my dad had bought me when I was 13, she passed away on February 5th, 2009, 5 years to the day. My dad passed away 5 years later. So I thought that was interesting because I definitely didn't remember that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so maybe not a lucky number, but one that's kind of always spoke to me. And so yesterday I messaged Sarah and said, hey, could we switch up our topics? We sort of have an idea of what topics we want to cover each week. And I said, it just feels right to talk about this now on the heels of, just again, grieving, because that grief never ends when you lose a parent. It's so life-changing.
Right.
And, even to think about the fact that it's been 9 years. I mean, yes, I have a almost 8-year-old son. So you'd think that I'd be able to grasp that, but like saying the fact that he's been gone almost a whole decade is really just hard to wrap your brain around a little bit. So yesterday I wrote about how anniversaries are tough, and all days you miss them. You miss them every day. You miss them in every moment. Particularly, I think if you lost your parent at a younger age, but anniversaries kind of are a little bit more difficult than just a typical day because it sort of takes you back to the day and how you found out and what you were doing. And so yeah, when that calendar flips over to February, it's like, oof, my heart feels so heavy because I know it's coming. And I'm transported right back to that phone call. And for me, it was right on the heels of an epic ski trip with a bunch of friends from here in Charleston. We were out in Telluride, Colorado, and we'd had just an awesome ski trip. And we were in a van, a shuttle driving to the airport. And I was actually looking out the window on the side of the road, all the forest and everything. And I'm just like searching for wild animals. And I'm laughing at myself while I'm doing it because I was like, I've got just enough Dave Carter in me. Like my dad was he was an avid hunter, but he was also just like connected to animals in such a spiritual way. He just had like a very special connection to animals. I can't describe it any other way. It was just something really innate in him. And so I'm like searching and I'm laughing about the fact that like the only other person that would understand this is my dad.
So you literally had that thought? Like you had that thought in that moment?
As he was, what I would later learn as he was having like a massive heart attack. But we were getting closer to the airport. We had kind of been out of cell phone range. And as we got closer, I checked my phone and I had a missed call from his wife and my brother. And I showed it to my husband. I said, "Oh, this can't be good." And so I called back, and sure enough, my brother just said he's gone. He had a massive heart attack on the job today and he's gone. And what I'd later learn is that they did resuscitate him, but he was so far away, so remote that it took the ambulance a really long time to get there. And so he was, for all intents and purposes, he was brain dead by the time he arrived at the hospital. So he was gone, though technically still breathing. But you can imagine anyone's reaction. It was shocking, to say the least. And I, the more I kind of think about this in my head, I feel so bad for the people riding in that van that day, because wow, that I'm certain ruined their day having to listen to somebody else get that phone call. So if anybody out there is listening that was riding in that van that day, I'm so very sorry that you had to bear witness to that, because I'm certain that it was not fun, not a fun ride to the airport for you either. But at any rate, once I kind of understood, okay, wait, he's still technically alive, it shifted to, okay, I've got to get there. And we came home and had to get our dogs. And then shortly after midnight on February 5th, he passed away.
Were you home then? Where were you whenever that happened?
So when he actually passed, I was still here in Charleston. We were planning to leave at like 5 a.m. to drive to West Virginia. And just because we had gotten in late, we had to get the dogs and all that jazz. So we were planning to leave at like 5 a.m. and he passed away shortly after midnight on February 5th. So yeah, never really got to say that goodbye. Never got to tell. At the time, I was about 5 weeks pregnant with a baby, and I had not told him in our last conversation. I had just spoken to him shortly before, a couple days before the trip, and I knew at that time I was pregnant, but I didn't tell him because I thought, oh, my mom will kill me if I tell my dad before I tell my mom.
Sure.
So I didn't tell him. And, maybe something that I regret the most, just because I never got to hear his reaction. I know he would have been so, so happy. Ultimately, I lost that baby about 5 weeks after that, but
5 weeks again?
Yeah, I was about 10 weeks pregnant when I went in, and for the first ultrasound, and there was no heartbeat. So that was that was loss on top of loss. But that baby served a big purpose, and that it got me through that loss. It gave me something to look forward to, something to focus on. I took care of myself. I wasn't like drinking myself into a stupor, like you might, could. So it certainly served a big purpose in my life, in its short life, during that time in my life. But yeah, so kind of following those losses, that next 6 months was really just like I walked around like in a stupor. Like I just couldn't like shake it. I cried all the time. I cried on the way to work. I cried on the way home. I cried if anybody said anything to me, like, I'm so sorry. I'd go in my office and just lose it. I got to the point where I didn't want anybody to even say anything to me, because I couldn't control my emotions. And so I just wanted people to kind of resume life. But then at the same time, I found myself angry that everyone else could just resume their lives, because they hadn't just suffered this massive change and loss in their life. And it truly is life-changing. There's nothing, that I've ever experienced anything like it, but it truly changed everything. That part of your whole life ends in so many ways. And I think even if my parents were married, it still would have been such a, a change in my life. But certainly the fact that they were divorced, like that whole side of my life, sort of went away after he passed. And so it was such a weird time. I was just like walking around in a fog for like 6 months.
Like everything was happening around you, but you just weren't able to kind of like be a part of it.
I wasn't really, nor did I care. Like I didn't really care about much. Probably could have been, diagnosed with something, some sort of depression during that time, just because I had a really hard time finding joy in anything.
Yeah.
we went on several trips that summer. We went to Costa Rica. We went to Sonoma out in California with great friends. Had a great time, but it's still just, it was just hard. It was just a hard 6 months.
Mhm.
And then right around my birthday that year, I had a dream about him.
Mm.
And he and I were like in a meadow. It was really bizarre. We're in a meadow. He couldn't talk to me. I like
Oh.
knew that I shouldn't be able to talk to him or look at him. And so I was like not really looking at him, but like stealing glances. Um, and I remember having all these questions that I wanted to ask him and
Mm.
couldn't. And then, I found out, a week later, 2 weeks later, that I was pregnant with my son, Jack.
Oh.
Um, and once I woke up from that dream, I thought, okay, he's going to visit me in my dreams. Like, it's okay. We're
Aw.
still going to have that connection. We had certainly talked about, if one of us died first, that we would find a way to communicate with the other one. We had some really deep conversations. We were very close. We left no stone unturned, which is such a positive thing. I knew exactly how he felt about me. He knew exactly how I felt about him.
Mm.
And, our souls were just connected. There's no other way to describe it. We were soulmates in some ways.
Aw. Mhm.
But yeah, after I had that dream about him, I thought, okay, it's going to be okay. I'm still going to be able to connect with him. He's going to make good on his word. We're going to be able to communicate with one another in some way. And now I see it so much more,
Really?
now when it happens, it brings me such joy. I get this huge smile on my face because I know that it's him. A song will come on the radio, like at the exact moment, the song that we danced to at my wedding, or one of our favorite country songs, or, something that I know is just him. Or my son will say something to me,
Yeah.
and it'll remind me of him. And I just laugh now because I'm like, oh, hey, Dad, I know that he's still there.
Mhm. I
So
remember you
yeah, I mean,
telling me that.
there's some really beautiful moments that come out of it too.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
remember.
but I mean, it just I'd always be like, is it coincidence? You certainly could be, but when things repeatedly happen like that, it tends to make you think it's a little bit more than a coincidence.
No, I totally believe that.
So,
Like, at my core, I believe that we just have these, and I don't know I don't even know how to describe it, but we just have these things that are like, this is telling me that this is what's happening, that I'm on the right track, or it's this person's reaching out to me. And it just adds that level of comfort. I remember you telling me that story about Jack, that whenever you mention it, I think about it actually a lot, that you guys were just driving in the car somewhere and he heard a song on the radio, I think, and said,
uh-huh,
Mom, does this remind you of your dad?
uh-huh,
And you had never even said that to Jack. He had never, and
mm-mm.
I don't even think you even thought the song even reminded you of it. You had to like take a moment and be like,
No, I didn't even. I had never really even listened to the words.
wow.
It's a Justin Bieber song called
No.
Ghost.
Mhm.
Um, but it's about like losing someone, like that you would settle for the ghost of them.
Mm.
And so, yeah, and he was like, Mom, does this remind you of your dad? And I'm like, what? At the time, he was like 6. I'm like, what
Wow.
6-year-old connects these two dots? And then I remembered, I was lucky enough to win a reading with the Hollywood medium Tyler Henry back in May of 2020. He was giving away 3 free readings during COVID. And if you commented on his post on Instagram, he was going to pick 3 people at random. So there were like thousands of posts. I mean, everybody, like, I just lost my mom. I just lost my grandma. I just lost my sister. I'm reading through all these posts and I thought, all right, if I want him to pick me, I've got to put in something a little bit different. And so I put something to the effect of like, I'd even wash my hair for a Skype date with you. Pick me. This was like right in the lockdown where no one was going outside. No one was showering on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And so I kind of like put it out there. And then Jeff and the kids were gone that night. I guess his parents had taken taken them. And so we were just biking around. We went and had a couple beers down on the dock, our neighbor's dock. And I remember sitting there watching the sunset thinking, like, how cool would that be if I actually won this reading Tyler Henry, because I've watched his show for years. And I mean, you can just tell like people get such closure from these readings. And people have a lot of feelings about mediums and readings. I respect that. Everybody has, entitled to their opinion. But for me, it was something that I really kind of always wanted. I wanted to be able to connect. And so when I woke up the next morning, it was like, Tyler Henry has tagged you in a post. And, sure enough, I had won this reading by him. So we did it via Skype, and I wasn't allowed to record it. But I was allowed to take notes. So I have like 6 pages of notes from that reading. But instantly my dad came through, and so many things that he said, nobody could have known. There's just no way. Nothing had ever been posted on social media about some of the things that he mentioned. And it was just mind blowing to me, but so it made it so real that I was really connecting with my dad, and that he had made good on his word and found a way to connect with me. He had a lot of things to say, a lot of messages for my mom and my brother. But, one thing that I do remember him saying is that he knows my kids. He watches over my kids at like a hawk. He made that very clear, which I could totally see my dad being that way. And then that he sees a lot of himself in my son, Jack, and that he kind of communicates with me through my son. So, that day when Jack was like, hey, does this remind you of your dad? I'm like, oh, hey, Dad. Like, I get it now. I see those moments, God winks, whatever you want to call them. Now that those are the kind of things that they give me so much hope and peace and joy, all the things that you're kind of missing after you lose a parent. Those moments just bring all that back for me. So that reading changed my life. I mean, there's no way to say it. Just as like the loss of a parent changed my life, that closure that I got, never having had the opportunity to say goodbye to him, since it was such it happened so quickly. It gave me so much peace, and that he's happy, and that he is still around, and that he is still watching over me and my kids, and he knows them. They don't, necessarily know him other than the stories I tell or through me, but he is seeing them and enjoying them, in all the ways that I had hoped. So it brought so much peace to my life. So if you're into that kind of thing, I can't recommend a medium experience more. I mean, certainly, not everybody's going to be able to have a reading with Tyler Henry, but I believe there are a lot of really good mediums out there. My friend Claire had a reading done with a woman here in Charleston. Same thing, just a really amazing experience, and some closure with her dad as well, who died when she was much younger. So, I think it can bring so much peace, especially if you lost a parent suddenly, and never really got to say goodbye.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that day. I remember whenever it happened. I remember talking to you in the days after it, and it was just it was very surreal, because I think, as we've talked about, our age group, we're coming up on that point where our parents are starting to get sick, or we're noticing changes within them, their abilities. Some of the things that they say, it's different. But I think you were the first one out of like the friend group that had really lost a parent in such a tragic way. And it was shocking, I think, for everybody who, loves and knows and cares about you, just to have that hit. It was really, I don't know what it was like for you. My parents, my stepdad died a few days, like a week, I don't know, like a little bit of time
after.
Yeah. And that was unexpected too. Actually, they both died the same way. Both Vietnam vets. Both just, had a pretty massive heart attack. Yeah. And ended up passing away. But it was shocking. Yeah.
It was so, I will say there's so many silver linings that come out of it, you
Mhm.
know.
Mhm.
The friendship support the friend support that I had. You know, you see people you haven't seen in 20 years, or just the people that kind of come out of the woodwork. It shocked me, quite frankly, some of the people that showed up at the funeral home. It really touched me in many ways. And Sarah, you were there like
Mhm.
all the time. I mean, you just like, I think you were like afraid to leave my side. Like maybe like, is she going to be okay? Because I was, you know, I mean, it was hard, and I was very
Mhm.
close to my dad.
Yeah.
But you were certainly there more so than anyone. Um, and so like that was so comforting. Grief and death make people really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's hard to talk about because you don't want to make people uncomfortable. You don't want to be Debbie Downer.
Mhm.
But I find for me, it helps me process my grief if I talk about it. And especially right after he died, I felt myself like bringing him up randomly in conversations with strangers or
Mhm.
just with anybody that I thought might listen and not get too uncomfortable because I was afraid I was going to forget something about him, or, you know,
Oh.
just that he would be forgotten if I wasn't talking about him, or, you know, it's just
Mhm.
hard. You're just trying to process all of it. And I just really wanted to talk about it. But like I said, it can make people very uncomfortable. Um,
Yeah.
and so finding those friends, honestly, like my friend Claire, who had lost her dad, finding friends that had already experienced the loss made it a little bit easier because they could obviously relate in many ways, and it made
Sure.
them less uncomfortable, I think, because
Mhm.
it also gave them the opportunity to talk about their parent that had passed.
Mhm.
And it just, you know, that's another thing um, that I find helpful is just talking. Sometimes just saying like,
Mhm.
hey, this 9 years later, like I cried half the day yesterday. Like I just,
Yeah.
no, I just you realize as each year kind of ticks past how much they've missed
Mm.
or missing out on. Particularly, I think if you have young kids, it can
Mhm.
be, you know, you just feel like they're missing things or that your kids are missing out on knowing them.
Sure.
Um, and so it's raw. It's still, it's like a wound, a deep wound that heals over. And at times it gets easier, but then
Mhm.
like the slightest thing can rip that scab off. And
Right.
it feels like the day it happened, you know, where you're
Yeah.
just kind of crying all day. But my husband's great at giving me space when, when those days
Mhm.
happen. And he's like, you do your thing.
Mhm.
Call me if you need me. We
Right.
danced in the kitchen last night.
Oh, that's
You know, it's
sweet.
just so he's not great with like talking about things, but he's great at just being present.
Sure.
And sometimes
Sure.
that's all you need, you know, is somebody just there.
Yeah, and I think you bring up some good points, like, you know, because we are talking about mental health and how this affects us on a daily basis. I know how to deal with this stuff clinically. Somebody presents in my office and has experienced some type of sudden or tragic death or complex grief where they're trying to kind of get over it. But that's different than whenever it's your friend or your husband. Like I'm just
Mm-hmm.
gonna like it really is. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and so we were chatting a little bit before this, like I just I don't say anything. I
Mm-hmm.
just rely on the person like you or my husband also lost his dad, heart attack, right after we
Mm-hmm.
got married on the December 23rd. And, I just don't say anything. And it's not because I don't remember, I don't care. It's just like, and I don't even know if that's the right approach, you know? But with him, it is. With you, probably not.
Right.
I probably should just be like, hey. um, but I think that it's tough as a friend whenever, you're kind of going through that. Or even like with my mom and her losing her husband, like I'm kind of like, I don't say anything. If somebody says something to me, then 100%. But like, what would you say like to your friends or to me or to
Yeah.
anybody else whenever you're in this position? Like, how can we best be supportive?
Well, I think you bring up a good point. Like sometimes not saying anything is fine because it can open that wound. You know, maybe
Sure.
yesterday if I was like doing something cool and it wasn't really on my mind, maybe I don't want to think about it necessarily that day. But
Right.
I am always surprised. I could probably name about 5 friends
Mhm.
or family members that always text me on February
Mm.
5th. And I'm always shocked that they remember because I'm like, I don't remember exact dates. I don't, I
Right.
just, I don't have the capacity to remember all of these things.
Mhm.
Um, but I'm shocked at the people that do. Sometimes they're not even like best
Mm.
friends. They're kind of,
Mhm.
like they're friends, but they're not like my bestie.
Right.
Um, but like it does bring so much happiness when they do because I realize, okay, they haven't forgotten him either, or they
Mm.
haven't forgotten
Mhm.
that part of my life, that it used to exist.
That's sweet.
And so it does. Just sometimes a text, and like a lot of times I don't have anything great to say back. I'll just say thanks and send like a kissing emoji or something.
Mhm.
Um, but it does mean a lot when somebody just recognizes it. Um, Even if it's just like, hey, thinking about you today. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
wow, you still remember that. That's amazing.
Mm. Mhm.
Or just like, friends like, hey, I don't, my friend Claire, I don't know if she put two and two together, but she just like out of the blue invited us out to their beach house for the weekend,
Mhm.
and had the weather been better, it would have been really nice, to go sit on the beach
Right.
yesterday morning and just kind of connect there, maybe meditate on the beach. It was a crappy rainy day, so I didn't get to do that. But friends just trying to like get you out. February in Charleston is just a really crappy month. Other
Oh.
than we have the Southeastern Wildlife Expo that happens mid-month, there really isn't much going on here in Charleston in February. The weather's crappy. It looks beautiful outside, but it's
Mm.
cold. Once you get out there, you're like, I don't really want to be out here. It's just not my favorite time of year. Nobody that lives in Charleston would tell you February is their
Oh.
favorite month.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, just people kind of pulling you out, making you do
Yeah.
something, making you laugh, making you just be around friends. We all know how important that is for our mental wellness.
Mhm.
Um, is to have those friendships and to have those that time together, that
Yeah.
quality time where you sit around and laugh and be yourself. So I think the biggest thing is just kind of like, if you remember, great, send a text. If you
Mhm.
don't, it's okay too, but just also be aware of like around this time of year my
Yeah.
friend might need me to pick up the phone and invite them out.
Definitely. Mhm.
I think that's the biggest thing for me. Or just listen. Sometimes when people just want to talk about, you may not care, but just listening when
Mhm.
people want to talk about their dad or their mom, whoever they've
Yeah.
lost.
I think that's a good point. Sometimes people don't need us to do anything and not even say the right thing back, but just even like you said with your husband, just be present. Just listen.
Mhm.
Just if it comes up and it's in a moment or if it's in a different place, just be there with them at that point.
Mhm.
Seems to be real important.
Yeah, exactly. Just kind of give them that space that they need. I also think, I know social media has a ton of negatives about it, but I think one of the great things about social media is the human connection.
Mm-hmm.
And when I posted yesterday, just my thoughts, kind of rambling my thoughts on about my dad's passing, but the people that respond and I love it when like his friends or
Mm,
his cousin or certain people will respond and they might even tell you like a little memory that they have of him. I love stuff like that, and it does bring me a lot of joy to just kind of like go through and see all the comments.
mm-hmm.
um, it just feels support. It just feels like you've got kind of like an army of people that also miss your dad or they or can commiserate. They've also lost a parent, had a lot of people reach out from like high school. A
Mm,
lot of people private message me, like, I know what
mm-hmm.
you're going through. It is so much harder on the anniversaries. And so I just think that it's such a positive way to connect with people to go, okay, I'm not the only person experiencing this,
Yeah.
and it's just normal. It's just a normal part of grief.
Mm-hmm.
Grief is love. That's what I put yesterday. Hashtag grief is love, because it is. If you didn't grieve somebody, then did you really love them?
That's
You know?
fair.
And the fact that I am still grieving this hard 9 years later, I think is a
Mm.
testament to the love that we shared.
No, I totally
and
agree.
special relationship. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And just like what I shared with you too, my husband with it, he was just like one day randomly, do you think I'll ever get over the loss of my dad? And I knew at that
yeah.
point, he's one of those people that whenever he asks you a question, he doesn't want you to sugarcoat it. Like if I started to get all like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, soft, then he probably that wouldn't have went well. He wouldn't have been very pleased. But I just looked at him and I said, no, you won't.
No.
You're not supposed to, is the answer. You know.
Right.
Um, it'll change, it'll maybe be different at different points of time, but it's never about, I don't think, letting go. I think it's about settling into like a new space and place with things, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And that is up for all of us who go through these different, times of grief to find where is our settling place, and what are those, I like that way that you kind of these like sightings almost of him being
Yeah,
present. That's so nice.
it is. I think you just have to look for those and not be afraid to say, oh, okay, that's my parent, interacting with me from
Mm-hmm.
the next world or whatever. They are, that they're still with you. And that's, you
Mm-hmm.
got to find joy in it. You got to find the things that make you laugh. Um, my brother and I, when we get together, we like to share stories about that. And, we just bust a gut laughing sometimes because we have so many good memories, and you just that's really what you have to fall back on. But
Mm-hmm.
anybody that's listening to this that maybe lost a parent recently within the past year, in my opinion, that first year is the hardest.
Mm-hmm.
That first 6 months is the hardest, and it does get better.
Mm-hmm.
Once you kind of move through that deep grief and letting go of it, it is what it is. Like, you can't change it at this point.
Yeah.
But once you can kind of move through that and let yourself feel all of those feelings, that anger
Mm-hmm.
that comes. Oh, I remember being so angry at times. Why did I have to lose my dad?
Mm-hmm.
Um, once you do that, things do get better. You start
Mm-hmm.
to experience joy again, real joy.
Mm-hmm.
And, like I said, you just start to see them all the time in your
Mm-hmm.
in your daily activities. And that's for me what carries me through are
Yeah.
those moments. If I'm sitting outside drinking a cup of coffee, I've got this coffee mug that I made him in like fifth
Mm-hmm.
grade or something, and it's got his picture on. And a lot of times out of that cup, and I'll sit outside on the porch, and I'll have like 5 cardinals come and land, right
No.
around me. It's just
Mm-hmm.
those moments. They with someone visiting,
Mm-hmm.
um, you just look for those because you think, okay, I'm not alone. They're here. What would they tell me to do when tough times happen? What would their advice be?
Mm-hmm.
That's, I think, probably one of the hardest about losing a parent is you lose your cheerleaders in life. No
Mm-hmm.
one cheers louder for us than our parents. No
Mm-hmm.
one thinks more of us than our parents, not our
Mm-hmm.
husband, no one, our best friends, no one.
Yeah.
And so when you lose that person, people that you can call, I'm so thankful I still have my mom because she
Mm-hmm.
is without a doubt my best friend and my biggest
Mm-hmm.
supporter.
Mm-hmm.
But, when you lose that person, I could always count on my dad. I could always count on him to, be there for me or to pump me up or to say the right thing. And my
Yeah.
mom too. But just having lost that, just, it's just another one of those losses that you have
Yeah.
to sort of work through.
Definitely a yuck, but the way that I think that you've worked with it and through it has just again been really beautiful, and your kids definitely know him, even though they never got the
Yeah.
chance to, like, even in just side conversations or things that you tell me about him or something, it's just, I don't know, it's really beautiful the sense that you get around them and knowing him even without him being here. So you've done an amazing
Mm.
job in kind of cultivating that. So
Oh, thank you. I do. we celebrate his birthday every year. We have birthday cake and we blow out candles, and
Oh.
I try to spend it. We'll go spend a day on a farm if we can. Birthday's in October, so I'll take him to the local farm here. We have lots of pictures around the house, and anytime they do something that kind of reminds me of dad, I'll point that out. And they have a lot of questions. My son particularly has a ton of questions. Jolie, I don't think grasps the whole concept yet, but my son Jack is very aware, and he reminds me so much of my dad. I mean, I just look at him and I know he looks a lot like my husband too, but I see so much of my dad in him, and the way he is with animals and just his demeanor. It so much reminds me of dad. But I've made it a point to just try to let them know about him. And I mean, it's the same way. My dad's mom passed away the year before I was born. So again, another parallel in our lives there.
Wow.
The year before I was born, she passed away. So I never met her. And he always said that I reminded him of his mom.
Really?
Yeah. And so we had a lot of conversations about that when I was a kid, about his mom, and how do you get through that grief? And so I used a lot of the things that he taught me. And the one thing I can remember him always saying is the hardest thing is, he goes, I could walk every inch of this earth and she's not here. I can't find her. And it's so true. It's just that whenever you lose a parent, that it's so final. Everything about it is so final, which you're like, duh, Jenny, or duh, it's death. But it is, it's gone. And it's a very weird concept to try to wrap your brain around. That part of your life has ended. So I look for the good. I definitely smile and laugh way more than I cry. But when I need to cry, I let myself cry. I let myself feel that, because there's no sense in holding that. Like, you gotta let it out. It'll eat you alive. So and I have really amazing friends that let me talk about it when I need to, or do a whole podcast on it if I need to.
No, it's so important though. Yeah. Oh,
it is. So that's that's where I'm at right now, 9 years later. Next year I'll be different, because it'll be 10 years, it'll be a full decade, which is just wild to think. I mean, it seems like it's been that long, but also it doesn't. It's just a weird sense of time,
Yeah, I don't think that time makes sense anymore. I don't think time makes sense at all, whether it's with our kids, with the losses that you're talking about now, how long the day is.
Right.
Or how short.
I was going to say, some days it feels like it just blows by.
Yeah.
Some days feel longer than others, but yeah, it's a process, as with anything. I think, some people could really, it all depends on where your relationship was and what your coping skills are. Again, I say, at the time being pregnant, it really did help me in so many ways. But I think, I probably could have gone to a therapist at some point too, instead of dragging it out for 6 months. I don't know really what the turning point was for me. It might have been getting pregnant with my son, Jack, but it was like a switch flipped, and I was like, could feel joy again.
Wow.
It was really crazy. But if you are experiencing that and it's gone on for some time, certainly reach out for some counseling, because there are some great grief counselors out there as well that can help you process your grief. But you certainly don't want to hold it in and let it fester.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of those things that you got to work through. It's yucky. It's not fun, but you got to get through the yucks too,
That's true. That's what we say anyways, right?
That's right. You get to the good and the fun. You got to get through the yuck.
That is true. That is true. Well, thank you for sharing your dad with us.
Oh, thank you for saying that. That's really sweet. Anytime. He was such an amazing person. He really was. He wasn't perfect. He had his faults, but he was Superman in my eyes. So yeah. See, I told you, guaranteed to cry during this.
Oh, I'm over here just a mess.
Even I know. And you are so not emotional, which cracks me up when you do get emotional because you just aren't by nature an emotional person.
Right. Odd that I'm a psychologist, right?
You have empathy. You're very
Empathy. That's right.
yeah, but you're not. I would never say that you're emotional.
No,
Not
well,
like me anyway. I'm a hot mess.
it's a weird range that probably I experience at different points in time, but I just really mean it. Like, I think that I really want to thank you for sharing with us because that was really sweet.
Oh, well, thank you. You're welcome. I hope
So,
that helps somebody
yeah.
going through grief right now. I mean, unfortunately, it's the club nobody wants to be a part of.
No,
And
yeah.
where can they find us?
That's right. You can find us at the LYLASpodcast.com, the LYLAS Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. We're also going to be on all social media platforms where you can listen to podcasts. So please, again, tune in, especially on our webpage, because we are going to have a lot of resources on here. Like, we're not, at some level, we're still, professionals, I guess. So even though that's not what this is kind of about, we feel an obligation to give you good resources to kind of turn to. So whether it harkens back to last episode talking about imposter syndrome or this one talking about grief, we'll definitely have some resources on there for you to use, share. There's lots of great resources out there for kids too. In general, default to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Putting some of that out there
for kids as well. Yeah, I would like to. I would also like to just get back listener feedback. Is this the kind of topics that you want to hear? Do you want to hear more about more of the fun, more of the good, or the yuck? I feel like we have to cover just because that's part of what was speaking to us when we started this podcast, was really trying to still be some level of support for other people. And to put it out there and to normalize things and to normalize these feelings and grief. I mean, like I said, grief can make people so uncomfortable, but to just talk about these things. So I'd like to go to our website at thelylaspodcast.com and give us some feedback in that little box on what kind of topics you would like to hear from us in the future. We've got a list, but we're also interested in what you're interested in.
Yeah. Yes. Yes, please. Yes, please. And,
Yes,
like you said, we're just here to be real. So, like, if we're talking about something, it's because that's where we're really at in that moment in space. And so we'll integrate things in as we can. And so we just want this again. We're here to be authentic, right?
Right. It's not fun to talk about grief and parent loss, but that's what we're here for.
That's it.
So,
all right. Well, thank you all for listening.
Yeah. Until next time, LYLAS.
LYLAS out.